Hi there, welcome back to my channel. It's James here. I hope you're doing okay. It's been a couple of weeks. I've just been dealing with some things, but I'm back now. I have a Nepenthes video that will probably drop next Monday or Tuesday. So if you're into the Nepenthes, keep an eye out for that. I'm really excited. This video is basically going to be split into two segments. So the first part of this video is going to be me kind of guiding you through the process of cutting my huge Philodendron glorious, which you can kind of see off camera here. I'll show you the top cutting afterwards. I've been air layering it for about 5 months, 4 to 5 months. I've been super cautious. I wanted the roots to be really prepared for the cut because I didn't want to lose, or I wanted to lose as little maturity as possible. And it was time because I think I speak about this, but one of the big leaves was like crashing into the wall and the ceiling, so it was time to cut it back. So I'm going to talk you through that, and then afterwards I'm going to show you some other large cuttings that I've taken from my plants this spring, what to do and what not to do, because I have some really bad examples of how to cut your large plants. So we'll talk about that in a second. Right, I hope you enjoyed the first little part of this. I kind of just shot little clips as I went, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to this plant. See you in a sec. Okay, so this is a bit of a terrifying moment for me, but it's going to go well. We're going to be okay. In the back corner there, I've spoken about this plant a lot. This is obviously my Mars Hydra grow tent, but we have a Philodendron glorious, which has been steadily getting bigger and bigger. Oh, I'm just going to move something so I can step inside over the past few months, and it's about time to cut it. So I've been air layering this plant, if I can get through here. I've been air layering this Philodendron for about half a year. I think I checked when I posted the video, it was like 158 days ago, so almost half a year. And yeah, I've double air layered it, so it looks super messy, but it's worked really well. I had an initial little pocket of sphagnum around the couple of nodes, which rooted super well, and then I added extra sphagnum and a slightly bigger bag, just because I wanted to make sure it was really well rooted. I think I spoke about this before, but if I had wanted to split this plant, so this is the third largest leaf, I think, third or fourth. If I'd wanted to split this plant into single nodes, like I would have waited a much shorter amount of time. I probably would have left each node, I would have wrapped them each in sphagnum and left them for like a month or so, especially given how good the aerial roots are anyway. And then I would have just chopped it up and they would have been well enough rooted to get started growing straight away. As it is, I want to keep this upper part of the plant as big and mature as possible. There's a really nice big leaf there. And it's gotten to the point where the new leaf is like crashing into the top of the grow tent. So I know that if I leave this too much longer, that leaf is going to get significantly damaged and it won't have space to properly open out. So what I'm going to do is cut this now, which, I mean, I want to wait much longer. I would give this another couple of months probably, just because I'm being overly cautious. But the time has come. So I'll show you what I mean about the smaller air layer. So with my Philodendron Splendid, who's right here, can I move? So this is my Philodendron Splendid. It's got a lovely new leaf coming out there. But this one is sort of in its first air layering session. The roots are going crazy. This is what the glorious looked like. And at this point, I kind of unwrapped it and then added more swag, a slightly larger bag, and then rewrapped it. And it really liked that. So I will do this with the Splendid and probably leave it another month or so before I cut, just because it has a little bit more space than the glorious does, a little bit, maybe a couple more leaves there. So that will be fine. We'll see, I might feel impulsive and do it straight away. But yeah, I'm gonna cut this now. I'm not entirely sure how I'm gonna film it, because I will definitely need both hands for this, but I will show you what it looks like after I have cut it. This leaf is amazing. Right, see you in a sec. Okay, so I've kind of propped you up on my Philodendron UPI, and I think you can see what's happening. So this lower node here, this is outside of the air layer, but I'm going to cut it as well because I think part of this node has rooted into the lower part of the sphagnum. So I might be able to get a rooted node from that. I will likely cut above it though for the rest of the plant, just so I'm not putting too much strain on the roots. You can see they're poking out the bottom here. I'm really scared about this. I'm worried that I'm going to cut it and it's going to fail. This is the thing, if I were cutting it, like I said, into individual nodes, I would have no hesitation about it at all. Like, even a couple of roots is good if you're trying to start cutting from scratch. But with this, if the roots aren't good, then it's going to be a struggle for it to get started and it will lose maturity. And I want to try and get it as big as possible. So I'm going to cut here, and then I'll cut all of the little strings that various like pulleys and strings that I have tying it to different parts of the tent. and then we will get started. I'm gonna have to chop it off this pole as well because this is running through the air layer. So I might not show you all of that because it will be a bit of a long, messy process, but I will come back to you once the philodendron is cut. Let's do the chop together actually. So right here, I'm scared. Let's go. Should be relatively easy. Try not to stab through the tent, and there you go. That's scary. That's a cut philodendron right there. Ooh, that philodendron smell as well, I love it. All right, see you in a second. So that's the second, well, the first, I can't speak. That's the latest fully unfurled leaf, and this is the one that's coming through, which hopefully will carry on growing. We'll see how the roots are doing in a second. And yeah, it's got quite a few. This one there's a little bit of bacteria damage because it was pressed up against the side of the grow tent. So I don't know, there was some humidity stuff happening there. And then there's this beauty. And then down here, they start to get a little bit, can I turn it without dropping it? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, this is a nice one. And then down here, they start getting a little bit bleached because they're below the grow light level. But yeah, I will chop this up, take off the nose that I need to chop up, and then I'll show you the next part. Look at that, crazy. So I kind of thought that this lower node here, which is this lovely leaf, was gonna be rooted as well, but it's not really. It's got like the beginnings of root growth, but it was already, so the growth, I can't speak. The roots had already kind of blackened before I air layered it, so I think it took a little while to get started. Whereas the ones up here, when I started air layering it, were still like juicy, lovely roots like the ones that are up here. So let's have a quick look inside. These lower roots are looking just amazing. That's exactly what I want to see. And there's also a lot of these kind of secondary roots growing out through the moss, which is a really good sign, because I want them to be as established as possible. And up here around the node, they're really, really, really good. So at least I know that I've got this node and this node here, which are well rooted. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut this leaf away. I'll show you in a second, and then I'll break down the moss just a little bit, see what the roots are like, and then I'll pot it straight up because I want to disturb it as little as possible. But yeah, that is the size of the root ball that I've got at the moment. Like I said, the first time you can kind of see the difference in the moss. This green stuff here was what I initially air layered it in, and then I added this whole second chunk, probably about a month ago at this point, maybe a little bit less, and the roots were just totally ready to go into it, so they shot down, which is a really good sign. Yeah, hopefully all goes well. In terms of how to tell when an air layer is ready, if you had it wrapped up like this, like I said, I've taken this off a little bit earlier than I would have otherwise, just because of space in the tent. But if I were waiting for it to be fully ready, like I have with other plants, I would wait until the roots were pressing right up against the plastic, like this is why I always use clear plastic. And then I want to be able to squeeze it, that I can feel it here, like the difference in resistance between just a plain pile of moss like this and a bit of moss that has roots throughout it is very, very different. So if you can squeeze it and it resists the squeeze, then it's got a good amount of roots through as well, so long as you can see them on the sides. Yeah, I think that's like the main thing. Also, people were asking me, I posted in my stories recently on Instagram about air layering, and people were asking how to water it. Really, really simple. Like all of this, as you can see, is just plastic. There's no holes in it, but I'll leave a small hole at the top, so around the stem, and a small hole at the bottom. And then I'll literally just pour water through. So it might come out the bottom, but it's kind of just an opportunity to water your plant as well. But I pour water through into the moss, make sure it's really, really nice and saturated. The way that it worked with this one is because the hole at the bottom was quite closed, it actually quite small, sorry. It actually filled to about here with water and then just slowly drained out, and it made sure the moss got really, really saturated. And yeah, just really, really easy to water. And I did that maybe once every 2 weeks at the beginning. And then as it got more full of roots, I had to do it more and more often. So we were getting to the point now with this where it was kind of like weekly, if not a little bit more sometimes. That was such a stressful moment. Like I said, I've been worrying about it literally for months and months, pushing off the air layer. I re-air layered it, even though the roots were probably well enough established beforehand. But it's totally worth it, because since I cut it, it was 2 days ago, I think, that I cut it. The new leaf has like been actively growing, which means it's super, super happy. So I'm going to show you I mean, it's been pushing up. You can kind of tell with the philodendron when it's actively pushing out a leaf because it will kind of bob throughout the day. So it's generally with mine, they start low and then throughout the day they kind of lift and then drop again as the leaf is growing out. So if you notice a lot of movement in your philodendron, so long as they're not like flopping, it means they're actively growing. So we're going to start with that, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 other large plants to show you. Spring is here. It is the time to cut if you have things. Okay. So this is the back of the plant, obviously. You can kind of see what I've done here. I didn't have a pot that I was happy with for it because I wanted to be able to watch the roots because I'm being a little bit of a sort of needy plant parent with this one. So I basically just stuck it in one of these big propagation tubs in moss for now. And once the roots are actively growing in there and it looks like it's okay and it hasn't panicked, I will transfer it into my normal airlayered mix. Yeah, so I just wanted to like make it not too much of a jump for it. It might end up being more harmful to have done this, but it felt right at the time. I've got a little tripod around it to keep it feeling really, really supported, and hopefully it will continue to put out some large leaves because I will obviously put it on something more aesthetically pleasing when I repot it, but for now this works. So yeah, right there is the new leaf, which has been actively unfurling, which is really exciting. I probably won't be the same size as the last one, just given the repotting stress. But if I turn it around, you can see like there's no discoloration, no floppiness in that leaf. It's really, oh, this is just such a big leaf. Really, really beautiful. And now that it's been cut back, hopefully it will be able to like put on some really good size without actually hitting the top of my grow tent. And once summer is fully here, once it's warm enough, I will keep it out of the grow tent, I think, to give it space to kind of spread. Because also at the moment, in order to fit it in my grow tent, I've had to tie all of the leaves in here because it was very like spread out. And these roots are just, oh, you can't see. These roots are just mad on the stem. So probably what I will do is maybe I was thinking about maybe air layering another node, not necessarily to cut, but just because it's a really good way of supplementing water and fertilizer. Like it's just another access point for the plant. So I noticed since after I air layered this glorious, that's when it started putting out really big growth because I was weekly watering and fertilizing this center part of the stem and not just the base. So yeah, I'll experiment with that. I'll see how it goes. Right, I'll move Glorious to the side for now. It's such a process to get things in and out of the tents at the moment. They are really crowded. So I took, between this and the Splendid, which I'm about to show you, I took over 20 cuttings, which are now potted up. So my grow tents are just absolutely at capacity. So I will be trading and selling some of those after a month or so once they're rooted and they have new growth. A lot of them have like a discoloration on the leaves. I think I spoke about this before because I had my grow lights a little bit too high. So they don't look the best. So I'm going to let them grow out a little bit before I sell or trade or anything, just so they're pretty plants. Right, so I cut my Splendid this morning and here she is. Definitely not as big as the Glorious. I'm going to hold it up. It's in a massive terracotta pot, which is a little bit heavy. So there we go. Definitely not as big as the Glorious, but still like a pretty hefty plant. Discoloration again from the grow lights. I'm hoping that now it's a little bit lower down, that won't be so much of an issue. But yeah, this is it. I've got one of the small cuttings, I don't know if you can see there, I don't want to turn it too much. One of the smaller cuttings just potted up in there to let it grow up alongside this large one. And yeah, I don't think there'll be any issues with this. Again, I think I said in the recording that I was going to leave it a little bit longer. But I actually took the air layer off and that root ball was so dense. Once I unwound them, the roots were very, very long. So I thought it was time and I needed space anyway. And what better time to do it than spring? This is another one that I probably won't keep in the grow tent the whole year. Depending on what it does, if it starts to use the side of the grow tent as support, then I'll leave it there. Otherwise, I'll bring it out and let it get some larger leaves in more open space. It's so pretty. And like obviously, if you've seen a Splendid before, they have the varicose backing to the leaves, that red. This new one is stunning. Sorry, I can't move it up and down too much. But yeah, really, really pretty plant. I'm happy with that. Second large cutting this spring. Okay, so those two are two really good examples of successful air layering so far. We'll see. Sometimes things kind of collapse very quickly after cutting them, which is why I was so cautious with the Glorious to try and get it as rooted as possible, because I just really want it to stay beautiful. It's such a special plant to me. Both these plants, I think I've some of you will have definitely seen this before, but these are the two plants that I got in the, I think I called it heartbreaking shipment or something like that, about just under 2 years ago, I think, and they came and they were completely rotted. They had no roots, they had no leaves. The Splendid actually rotted back to a single node. I think the Glorious had 1 or 2, I can't remember. But yeah, they've done amazingly. There's so much growth, so tall, and now I've, like I said, I've got a ton of cuttings of them, so it was definitely worth the stress. So, unsuccessful air layering. This happens quite a lot. I put a little poll, a little question box up on my Instagram when I was doing this. I will do a more in-depth air layer video actually showing you how to do it as well. One of the things that a lot of people were saying is that they were struggling with like the moss drying out or what substrate to use. Apparently you can use a lot of stuff. I've only ever done it with moss and soil. So you can get kind of containers to clip around nodes and fill them with soil. I literally just use moss and a plastic bag, and I have a hole at the top, a hole at the bottom, and I pour water through so that the moss can get really saturated. That's literally it. So in that sense, I've never had issues, but what I have had issues with, which I'm about to show you, is roots being really nicely established in the air layer and then panicking like crazy when you take them out. I'm not sure whether it's the shift in humidity or just the sudden cut or something. So this is what happened with this Epipremnum pinnatum, this Albo Epipremnum pinnatum. I posted it on a story just after I cut it, and it looked spectacular. It was so beautiful. It still looks nice, but it's definitely getting a little bit floppy here. It was like, these were really turgid, solid leaves. They're not dying, but they don't look great. This leaf still looks all right. Really nice variegation on it. And what happened here is that I cut it and the roots just decided they wanted to die. So a large segment of them fell off, and I'm just rerouting it in water at the moment. I'll show you again with the next plant. I found that for large plants, water is the way to go, at least initially, until you get roots sort of starting to build up. If you try and go straight into moss or some other medium, unless it's passive hydro, they don't tend to, the supply of water isn't enough for the size of the plant. Even here, I think a lot of this wilting is to do with the plant being so big, the leaf area being so large, and the supply of water being still relatively small with the roots. So if I had this in moss, I think it would have fallen apart already, or I would have cut it up into nodes. I am keen to keep it like this for now, at least until it's rooted, and I might cut it later. You can already see that the new leaf is drastically less mature. It doesn't have any fenestrations. But yeah, this is how a bad one can go. I'm not sure what happened 100% here. I don't know whether, yeah, I really don't know. The roots were not huge. They weren't like really big roots. They weren't the size of the Glorious or the Splendid ones, but they should have been enough to sustain this plant. I think it just panicked, which happens. But so far so good. It's been like this for about a month, I'd say now, so it's not going anywhere. And it's still really pretty. So yeah, Epipremnum pinnatum, Albo, and yeah, we're just going to keep it in here. I just have it in a pot of water. I actually need to clean out the water. I've been putting a little bit of fertilizer in, which is helpful for the plant's growth, but it means that the water kind of gets icky quite fast. So you have to replace it a little bit more regularly. Okay, another plant that I've been rooting in water, and this was not a failed air layer. This was just me being stupid and spontaneous. I cut up my large Philodendron bilietiae. This is it. So the lower cuttings had really big aerial roots. It's quite a big plant. Quite a large Philodendron. Really big leaves, especially this one. So the lower parts had pretty established roots, so I just took those and stuck them in moss, and they're fine. They're growing really well. This upper part had very few aerial roots, but I just decided to cut it anyway and stick it in water, and they've actually rooted pretty well. There's a bit of gunk on the stem from sitting in the water, but there's lots of active aerial root growth here, which is fantastic. I'm sure this plant will be okay. What I am also sure about is that the next growth is going to come out drastically less mature again, same as with the Epipremnum. But that's not too much of an issue. From something this large and with leaves this size, I'm confident the maturity will come back quite quickly. And it's just really pretty. It's so big that it's really hard to hold into the frame. But lovely plant. I can't wait for my variegated one to get this size. Just look at that. And obviously the backing of the leaves is that orange, super pretty. I should not have done it this way. I should have airlayered it. I should have prepared the cutting somehow if I was going to take such a large chunk. But this, sometimes you just want to do it. Sometimes you just want to cut and deal with the consequences afterwards. And we can talk about the last one. Is that it? Yeah, this is 5 plants. Last one is another spontaneous cut actually, but with this one it was completely fine. Sometimes, particularly if you have a very high humidity environment like this, you'll find that the aerial roots grow really, really big. The same with the lower cuttings of this Epipremnum pinnatum that I cut. They had super established aerial roots that were kind of branching off anyway. So once I cut them and popped them up, they just got on with growing. That's the case with this large-ish Monstera aurea. So decent variegation on that leaf, lovely variegation on this leaf, none on this one, which is kind of why I cut the plant, and then a decent amount here. I was just noticing like a gradual reduction in variegation in the plant, which is not a huge problem, but I wanted to try and keep a little bit more, so I decided to chop this plant. It had aerial roots that were like growing all the way back against the side of the grow tent, so attached down and then under the mat that is at the base of the grow tent. So there's kind of like a little containing mat so that water doesn't drop down into the lower part of the grow tent, I think, and dirt and stuff like that. And it was growing in under there and branching out, so the roots were really well established. I cut it and some other nodes, and it has been totally fine. You can see, again, it's in one of these containers just so I can see what's happening with the roots, and they are really like actively growing all around there. Yeah, this plant is doing incredibly well. So that is another option. You don't need to necessarily airlayer a plant if it has really, really well developed aerial roots already. This leaf is really nice. Obviously this variegation will become more yellow like that, but I don't know, can you see what I mean? Like, it's a lovely plant, but the lower part and the other cuttings that I took have like at least a little bit of sectoral variegation, or a bit more. It kind of just looks a little bit too green for an aurea anyway. So I'm going to keep it. Obviously I'm going to grow it out. You never know what's going to happen with the next variegation. The next leaf might come out like half yellow. But yeah, another example of a large plant cut. That is literally it for today. Just wanted to show you some of the large cuttings that I've been taking this spring. There are a few more actually. I'm going to be growing these out. I have a lot of propagations from each of the plants too. So at some point during the next months, I'll probably try and sell a couple of those. If you're based in the UK, keep an eye out for that. I'll probably post about it on my Instagram. I might mention it here. Yeah, share some of these plants around. Right, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, stick them down in the comments below. If you've cut any of your large plants and you're terrified slash excited like me, let me know. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you want to. Check out my Instagram, @slugplants. I post there pretty regularly. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you very, very soon. Goodbye.